Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into something really cool. It's the psychology of money.
Woo, interesting.
Yeah, so not just, the numbers and the spreadsheets, but like how our brains actually work with money.
Right, right.
And for this one, we've got a ton of different sources. Like we've got Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money.
Oh, yeah, good
We've
one.
got a whole bunch of blog posts, reviews, even like a YouTube discussion on this.
Sounds like we did our homework.
Yeah, so get ready because, when it comes to money, it turns out it's not all just, dry finance stuff.
Way more to it.
Exactly. Like one of the big things we saw again and again in all these sources is judging other people's money choices, like saying they're crazy,
Yeah,
is probably like missing the whole point.
a huge point. It's like, think about this. Someone who lives through crazy high inflation, they're going to see bonds totally differently than someone who went through, like, the Great Depression,
Well, that's true.
It's not about smarts, it's about where they're coming from.
Rich Frugal Life, they had this really good point about it. Someone whose savings just got wiped out by inflation, of course they're going to be like, I don't trust these normal investments.
Makes sense, right.
Total sense. And that's what Good Life Journey was getting at too. Like judging someone's choices is tough because what's nuts to you might be perfectly logical for them based on, what they've been through.
Their own money story, yeah.
That's such a good phrase, their money story. Speaking of stories, the one that really stuck with me from Housel's book, it's the Bill Gates one.
Oh, right, the one where he talks about luck and risk and how big they are?
Yes. Like Gates went to one of the only high schools in the country that had a computer in the 60s. What if he hadn't? Was he even be Bill Gates, even if he was still super smart?
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Totally changes things. And then there's the risk part, too. His friend, Ken Evans, also brilliant with computers, died young.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Tragic. It really hits you. Luck and risk, they can just like make or break things more than we want to admit sometimes.
Much more, yeah.
It kind of takes the pressure off, right? Like if things go bad, sometimes it's just bad luck, not that you messed up.
That's a good way to look at it.
And when things go well, maybe it wasn't all you being a genius.
Humility's good too.
Right. Which actually leads to something Housel talks about, how these little things, over time, they can have huge effects. He uses this cool analogy.
Oh, I like analogies. What is it?
It's about ice ages. It's in one of the summaries of his book. Like a tiny bit of snow, if it doesn't melt each year, over time it becomes this massive glacier.
Wow, I see what he's getting at.
Right. Like even small savings, if you keep at it, they can build up like crazy.
Like the saying, little by little, a little becomes a lot.
That's it. And speaking of a lot, there's Warren Buffett. Good Life Journey said 96% of his wealth he made it after he turned 65.
No kidding. Really shows you long game is where it's at.
Right. Consistency beats trying to get rich quick. But then there's this YouTube video by Deep Value Talk. They compare Buffett to this other investor, James Simons.
Okay, haven't heard of him.
Simons actually made way higher average returns,
Interesting.
but he started late. So even though Simons did great, Buffett starting early and just staying in the game made him way richer.
Time is definitely on your side if you let it be.
For sure. And this brings up something I want to ask you listening. When it comes to money, what does enough even mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Seems simple, but in all this research we did, it's a real head-scratcher.
Housel's book really goes deep on this.
Yeah, like people keep trumpeting what enough means as their life changes, so they never actually feel content.
That makes sense though, right?
One of the book reviews says, capitalism is great at making wealth, but it also makes us jealous.
Oh, that's so true. Always wanting more.
And it never ends. But maybe real wealth is what you don't spend,
Ooh, that's an interesting thought.
Right, like maybe that trip you didn't take, that fancy thing you resisted, those are what make you wealthy, not the stuff you show off.
Makes you think differently about it.
Totally. Yeah, it's like changing how you think about it instead of, oh, I got to get this. It's like, no, I'm choosing not to get this.
Exactly, a whole different mindset. And that kind of leads into this other big thing about money psychology being reasonable, not just rational. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, Good Life Journey and The Outlier Coach, they were both saying we're not like robots with money. Emotions are a huge part of it.
Makes sense. We're human after all.
Right. One of the examples was sticking with like a decent index fund, even if it makes a bit less money on paper, could be way better long-term than chasing the perfect investment that's super stressful.
Oh, yeah, like you got to factor in the mental costs, too.
Exactly. Peace of mind is worth something. And speaking of avoiding future regrets, history matters a lot with money, but there's a catch.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. History doesn't repeat itself exactly.
Exactly. It rhymes, though. Like Deep Value Talk on YouTube said, if geologists only studied the past, they'd miss earthquakes and volcanoes.
That's a great way to put it. So true.
Right. The world changes, money changes, like even 401ks. Those haven't been around forever.
They feel so normal now. It's weird to think about.
I know. So thinking about all this, it brings up a question for you listening. What's your game plan with money?
Yeah, what are you working towards?
Because everyone's different, right? Someone saving for a house in 5 years is going to do things way differently than someone who's like, retirement is decades away.
Totally, you're playing different games.
And Good Life Journey talked about how when people get those mixed up, that's how bubbles happen.
Like long-term investors suddenly acting like day traders.
Exactly, following the hype instead of their own plan. So what is your plan? What matters most to you?
What are your priorities?
Good stuff to think about. And while we're in this thinking mood, can we talk about saving for a sec?
The boring but important stuff.
Seriously, it gets overshadowed by like, I got to get big returns. But in a lot of our sources, saving was even more crucial, especially if you're not making millions.
Makes sense. It's the foundation.
And there's this quote I love. I think it was from Housel. It says, savings equals income minus ego.
Whoa, that's deep. I like that.
Right. Saving isn't about being cheap. It's about, like, are you spending on what you actually care about or just to impress people?
Ego check, for sure.
And what saving buys you is freedom. You know, you can take risks, jump on opportunities, even if crap hits the fan.
Without panicking.
Exactly. Way less stressful than, like, always being one paycheck away from disaster.
It's like security and options instead of just flashy stuff.
Yeah, might not be as Instagram-worthy, but it's way more powerful in the long run. Yeah, it's like having that safety net, knowing you're good, even if things get rough.
Totally. That's real peace of mind, not just about money, but like in your head too.
It's like not being scared all the time about money. Being able to make choices because you want to, not just because you have to.
Exactly. And that brings us back to something we talked about earlier. You know, all this stuff about how our own personal stories with money, they really shape how we act.
It's wild, right? We think we're being all logical, but then it's like, wait, why do I always freak out about spending money?
Haha, yeah, it's like these hidden rules we've got in our heads from who knows where.
Exactly. Which is why, and this is for everyone listening, it's worth taking a minute to think about your own money story. You know,
Where did your ideas of money even come from?
like good and bad experiences. How have they like made you the money person you are today?
It's deep stuff, but once you kind of get it, it's like, oh, that's why I do that.
Totally. And then you can start making choices on purpose instead of just reacting all the time.
It's empowering, you know, not letting your past totally run the show.
And maybe even like changing those old stories, going from I never have enough to I can build abundance.
It's a journey for sure, but knowing about all the psychology stuff, it gives you the tools, you know.
Absolutely. Man, we covered so much in this deep dive.
We did, from like childhood memories to saving for retirement.
And it all connects. It's not just numbers. It's us, our brains and our emotions and all that.
It's fascinating how much of it isn't about spreadsheets at all.
So to wrap things up as you go about your week, think about your own money story, where it came from, and what choices you can make now to create the future you want.
Because it's never too late to start writing a new chapter.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you next time for another one.